The great halls of the Sarati Empire felt colder than the winter winds of Earth. They were made of dark metal, smooth and polished, reflecting the faces of every alien who walked inside. The Sarati were tall and sharp, with silver eyes that never showed warmth. They ruled 50 star systems and 10 species. Among those species, humans were the youngest and the most disliked. They were seen as messy, emotional, loud, and weak. That was how the Sarati described them, soft bodies with loud mouths. Daniel knew all of this as he walked through the hall. He tried to keep his steps steady, but his heart beat too fast and his palms were sweating. 2 Sarati guards walked behind him, their steps heavy and controlled. Their armor shined like black glass dot. No human had ever been invited inside the forbidden court of the Sarati Empire, and for many, this was not an honor, it was a warning. Stories said that the last species to stand inside this hall left with chains around their necks. Humans feared the same fate, but still, Daniel came. He was a writer on Earth, not a soldier, not a scientist, not a politician, just a writer. He wrote about war, about peace, about people who cried and people who survived. He wrote about small things like love and big things like death. He believed that writing was not just words, but pieces of the human heart placed on paper. The Galactic Council had demanded one human voice to tell the truth of the Sarati War. Many humans refused. They said that whoever wrote the truth would never return home. They feared death, torture, or worse, silence. To be forgotten was a bigger fear than to die. Daniel did not refuse. Something inside him whispered that someone had to speak. Someone had to tell what the war really was, and what it had done to souls on both sides. He believed in truth, even if truth was painful. When the guards pushed open the final door, Daniel saw the throne room. It was enormous. The ceiling was so high that clouds of mist formed near the top. Light came from crystals that floated in the air like cold stars. The entire room was shaped in triangles and sharp edges, like it was carved by blades. A long carpet of dark purple led to the throne, and on that throne sat the Sarati Queen. She looked like a statue made of silver and stone. Her hair was pale white, her skin almost glowing in the dim light, and her eyes were like 2 moons, calm but dangerous. Her presence alone made the air feel heavy. Daniel wanted to bow, but did not know how to bow like a Sarati. So he only lowered his head a little, hoping not to offend her. Around the hall, Sarati nobles and warriors stood with cold expressions. Some whispered among themselves. Their voices sounded like metal scraping against metal. "Is that the human?" One whispered. "He looks fragile," another said. "Why send a writer? Why not a king?" A third added with a chuckle. Daniel heard every word, but he did not react. He kept his eyes forward. The queen raised her hand, and the room went silent in a second. Her voice was smooth but sharp, like flowing water that could cut through stone. "This," she said, pointing to Daniel, "is the human writer." She studied him silently for a few seconds, and those seconds felt like hours. Daniel felt exposed, like she could see not just his face but his fears and memories too. After a moment, she spoke again. "The Council demands a human account of the war," she said. "They say humans are emotional. They say humans bleed words. They say humans write what others fear to speak." She paused, her silver eyes narrowing slightly. "So write." Daniel's throat felt dry. "What shall I write, Your Majesty?" he asked in a small voice. The queen leaned back on her throne. "Write what you see," she said. "Write what you remember. Write what others are afraid to speak." The nobles were shocked. Some gasped. Others whispered fiercely. They expected lies, praise, or propaganda. But the queen asked for truth, and truth was the most dangerous thing in any empire. Daniel nodded slowly. He did not know if she respected him or if she wanted to test him. But he felt something heavy settle in his chest, a responsibility larger than planets. He realized that this place, This cold hall was not asking for stories. It was asking for courage, and humans, even when small, had something powerful inside them, courage wrapped in fragile hearts. With that thought, Daniel agreed. The queen lifted her hand one last time and said, "Begin tomorrow." And just like that, the throne room doors closed behind him. But as he walked away, one thought stayed in his mind: he would write the truth, even if the truth killed him. The next morning, Daniel returned to the throne room with a notebook in his hands. The air felt heavier than before. The Sarati nobles and soldiers were already waiting, standing in straight lines, their silver eyes cold and suspicious. Some of them whispered, their voices sharp like metal knives scraping. Others just stared. No one had ever seen a human right inside the Forbidden's court. No one had ever seen a human dare to speak truth in front of the queen. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he opened his notebook. He had spent the night thinking about what to write first. Should he praise the Sarati victories? Should he describe humans as brave and loyal? Or should he write the truth, harsh, painful, impossible to ignore? He chose the truth. He wrote about burned cities where families had no homes. He wrote about villages reduced to rubble. He wrote about women holding crying children in the cold, trying to protect them from soldiers who had been told that killing was honor. He wrote about men who returned from battle empty, haunted by memories they could not speak. He wrote about humans who begged for mercy and aliens who learned fear too late. Every word was a wound. Every sentence a small rebellion against the lies that everyone else preferred. The nobles watched him. Some tried to hide their reactions, but their lips twitched, their hands tightened, and their eyes darted to the queen. She said nothing. She only read. Hours passed. Daniel wrote while the sun moved slowly over the city outside. His words painted horrors and hopes, losses and love. He wrote of children learning the word orphan too early, of mothers whispering lullabies to calm their terror, and of fathers who returned from battle only to find that their homes no longer existed. One of the generals leaned toward another and whispered, "This is dangerous. He cannot write this. He makes us look weak," another replied. Daniel heard nothing. He did not flinch. He only wrote. By midday, a Sarati noble approached him, his voice sharp and full of judgment. "Do you understand what you are doing, human? You are not just insulting the Empire. You are insulting our pride, our strength, our history. One wrong word and you will be punished. You will vanish." Daniel paused for a moment, his pen hovering over the page. Then he wrote again, slowly, deliberately. "Strength without truth is empty. Power without honor is shame. And silence hides nothing but fear." The noble froze. No one had ever dared write words like that in front of the queen. A hush fell over the room. The only sound was Daniel's pen scratching on paper, steady and unwavering. That night, when Daniel left the court, he did not feel relief. He felt the weight of every word he had written. Every word carried pain, not just his own, but the pain of the millions who had suffered. The stories he had written were not just history. They were warnings. Back in his small room in the palace, Daniel reread the pages. Tears blurred his vision. He realized that truth was not gentle. It was heavy, sharp, and dangerous. Yet it had a power that no weapon, no army, no empire could ever have. Truth could hurt. Truth could awaken. And sometimes, truth could even change the hearts of those who had never known mercy. The next morning, Daniel returned again. The queen was already waiting, her expression unreadable. She lifted her hand slightly, signaling him to begin. Daniel read aloud this time. He read of battles, of fear, of heartbreak, of courage, and of hope. The nobles winced, the soldiers shifted uncomfortably, and even the queen's face showed the faintest flicker of emotion. Some whispered, "Too honest. Too dangerous." Others muttered, This human is either fearless or foolish. Daniel did not stop. He read the stories of those who had lost everything and yet carried on. He read about hope in the midst of despair, about kindness in the shadow of cruelty, about humans who dared to be brave when the universe had told them they were nothing. When he finished, the Queen did not speak immediately. She leaned back and studied the notebook. For a long moment, silence filled the room, a silence so heavy that Daniel felt it in his bones. Then, slowly she closed her eyes, letting out a faint breath. The nobles looked shocked. Some were angry, others confused. But the Queen only said softly, almost to herself, "He writes what we are afraid to see." Daniel realized something important in that moment. Fear could not stop truth. Power could not silence words. And even in the coldest, harshest empire, a single human could still make them listen. That night, as he lay on his narrow cot, Daniel whispered to himself, "I will not stop. I will write everything." And for the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, his words could matter. The Queen's next order surprised everyone. She commanded Daniel to speak with the veteran soldiers who had survived the war. They were the strongest, the most disciplined, and the most feared in the Serati Empire. Their armor was scarred, their eyes sharp, and their hands steady with years of battle. To them, humans were weak. And to them, Daniel would be nothing more than a fragile voice they could ignore. But Daniel had learned something in the last days. Courage does not come from size or strength. It comes from standing in front of fear and refusing to look away. He entered the barracks where the veterans lived. The air smelled of metal, sweat, and gunpowder. The soldiers stopped what they were doing and stared at him. Their silence was heavy, almost like a wall. One of them, a tall Serati with a jagged scar across his face, spoke first. "Why are you here, human? Do you not know you will fail? Do you not know we will not tell our stories to the likes of you?" Daniel swallowed. His throat was dry. But he did not step back. "I am here to listen," he said simply. "Not to judge. Not to praise. I just want to hear what you remember." The veterans laughed, short and bitter. "You are brave. Or foolish." For hours, Daniel asked questions. He asked about battles, about victories, about fear, and about loss. At first, the veterans gave only short answers, words measured and cold. They had been trained to hide their emotions, to carry strength like armor, to never let weakness show. But Daniel's eyes were calm, human, and open. There was no mockery, no judgment, only attention. Slowly, cracks began to appear. One veteran, a woman with silver hair streaked with black, spoke quietly. I feared I would never come home. I thought the battle would take me, and I would vanish without a name. I carried that fear like a shadow every day, every night." Another soldier, a tall man with scars on his hands, said, his voice breaking slightly, "I dream of the battlefield even now. I see my friends fall. I see the screams. I cannot sleep without hearing their voices." Daniel wrote everything. Every word, every pause, every tremble in their voices. He wrote about their courage, their guilt, and their sorrow. He wrote about the pain they had carried silently, the horrors they had seen, and the humanity that even warriors could not erase. When he asked about loss, a third veteran, barely older than Daniel, spoke in a whisper. "My brother. He never came back. I remember his smile and then nothing. I carry that emptiness with me every day, and no one dares speak of it. It is forbidden to mourn too loudly in the Empire." Daniel's hand moved faster, his heart heavy. He understood now why the Queen had sent him here. These soldiers, these veterans, were proud. They were strong. But they were also human, or at least sentient enough to feel. And their pain had been locked away because the Empire feared weakness. By the time the day ended, Daniel had pages filled with confessions, memories, and quiet truths. When the veterans saw him leaving, some nodded slowly. Not words of approval, but gestures of respect. Daniel realized that even in an empire that prided itself on strength, courage was more than fighting, it was telling the truth. And even the fiercest warriors could carry sorrow hidden under layers of discipline. That evening, back in his small room, Daniel reread the words. Tears blurred his vision. These were not stories of victory or glory. They were stories of survival, of fear, of loss, and of humanity. He understood something important. These veterans had taught him that strength was not silence. Strength was holding truth in your hands, even when it burned your soul. And perhaps, Daniel thought, this was the real reason the Queen had asked him to write, to show the empire that power without honesty is nothing. The next morning, when Daniel returned to the throne room, the Queen asked quietly, "Did they speak?" Daniel nodded. They did. And they carried more than weapons. They carried pain and fear and love. I wrote it all. The Queen's silver eyes softened, just a little. Then you are beginning to understand. Truth is stronger than fear, human. And words? Words are weapons that can change hearts. Daniel felt hope for the first time. Maybe, just maybe, his writing could awaken the empire. And for the first time, he believed that even a human small, fragile, and alone could make a difference in a universe built on fear and power. The day finally came when Daniel had to present his manuscript to the Queen in front of the entire court. The throne room was packed with nobles, generals, and ambassadors from distant star systems. The air was thick with tension, like a storm about to break. Humans were gathered in the back, small and quiet, clutching each other's hands. They feared what might happen. The Serati, tall and cold, whispered among themselves, their silver eyes sharp, gleaming with suspicion. Daniel's notebook felt heavier in his hands than ever before. Every page carried months of war, tears, and truth. Every word he had written had been a risk. One wrong word could end his life. One sentence too honest could bring the wrath of an empire down on him. But he could not change a single line. The Queen sat on her black crystal throne, her presence commanding silence. Her eyes scanned the crowd, and then she looked at Daniel. No one moved. The hum of whispers faded into stillness. She spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. This human has written the truth. Gasps echoed through the hall. Some nobles covered their mouths, horrified. Generals gripped their weapons tightly. Ambassadors whispered urgently to each other. Daniel stood quietly, letting the weight of her words sink in. The head of the Serati Military Council, a tall, jagged man with cold eyes, rose. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice sharp, "this manuscript, it insults our victories. It paints the empire as weak. It will spread doubt, anger, and fear. This human should be punished." Another noble joined in. "We cannot allow this. The empire will fracture if we show weakness." Daniel felt his chest tighten, but he did not back down. He stepped forward and spoke, his voice steady, carrying the weight of human courage. "I did not write to insult. I wrote to show reality. The empire is strong because it rules with power. But power without truth is empty. Fear without honesty is hollow. We survived the war, yes, but we survived because truth, pain, and courage exist in everyone, even those who fight on the front lines." The hall erupted in murmurs. Some laughed bitterly. Others whispered, shocked by his boldness. A few humans gasped, clutching their hearts. The Queen lifted a hand, silencing the room. "Do you think I asked for lies?" she said quietly. "Do you think I needed praise? I asked for truth. Because only truth teaches us who we are. Only truth shows the heart of an empire. And only truth can make us stronger, not just in power, but in wisdom." A general shouted, "You are encouraging weakness. Pain is not strength." The Queen's voice rang louder this time, firm and commanding. Strength is not silence. Strength is the courage to face what you fear. Strength is listening, even when it hurts. This human wrote what others would not dare. And in doing so, he reminded us that even the smallest voice carries meaning. Daniel's heart pounded. He had never expected such support from the Queen. He had feared death, humiliation, or chains. But her words gave him hope, a fragile burning hope. One by one, the nobles and generals fell silent. Some clenched their fists, still angry. Others lowered their heads, ashamed. A few alien ambassadors from distant systems nodded slowly, understanding the power of the words. The Queen finally addressed the court, her eyes glinting like steel. This manuscript will not be hidden. It will be copied. It will be spread across the empire. Let every citizen see what we fear and what we survive. Let them know that courage is not just fighting wars, it is facing truth. Let them see that even a human, small and fragile, can change hearts and minds. Daniel's hands trembled as he handed the notebook to the Queen. She took it, opened the cover, and studied it carefully. Then she looked at him, her silver eyes soft, almost like she could see into his soul. "You have done what few could," she said quietly. "You have reminded an empire that truth matters more than pride, that honesty is stronger than fear." The room remained silent. The tension slowly melted into something new, of fragile respect. Even the generals, though unwilling to admit it aloud, understood that the human had not been reckless. He had been brave. Daniel realized that day that courage was contagious. That words, when honest and fearless, could shift the balance of power in ways armies never could. And for the first time, he felt that the impossible might be possible, that a single human voice could echo across the stars, reaching hearts that had never dared to feel. The words Daniel had written spread faster than anyone could have imagined. Copies of his manuscript reached every corner of the Sarati Empire. In human districts, people whispered in awe, reading the truth of the war for the first time. They saw themselves not as weak, but as survivors. They felt hope. But not everyone welcomed truth. A faction of Sarati nobles, loyal only to power, saw danger. They whispered among themselves, angry and bitter. "This human is poisoning the empire," one said. "He has shown weakness to the masses. The Queen is losing control." It did not take long for anger to turn into action. Fires broke out in human districts. Ships were ambushed in orbit. Messages of rebellion spread like wildfire. The empire, once calm and ordered, shook with fear. Daniel watched from the palace as soldiers ran through the streets, carrying orders, fighting small skirmishes. Humans huddled in corners, clutching their children, terrified of being blamed for the unrest. He had wanted to show truth. He had wanted to give hope. But now that truth was shaking the foundations of the empire.